Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Slegaitis-Smith, and on this channel we like to talk about writing, learning, and creating. Today I have a writing-based video for you where we are going to be discussing how to plot out a novel. If you are a writer who has ever talked to another writer, chances are this topic has come up. That's because there are several very strong camps on this topic where there are people who believe very strongly that there is one way or another that is the best way to plot a novel. In reality, the best way to plot a novel is the way that you're going to get one done. So, I'm going to be showing you several different methods that you can use so that you can find something that you are comfortable with so that you can finally get to that end goal of having your book finished. The first method we are going to talk about is one that has a name that not everybody likes. It's called being a pantser. It's short for going by the seat of your pants, which it pretty much means that you are working without an outline for your story. Most people don't like this title because it sounds like certain other activities that are not very nice, and it just kind of sounds a little bit silly, but the idea of being without an outline is what you're going for. I much prefer the term and kind of methodology that Dean Wesley Smith came up with, where he calls it writing into the dark, which is pretty much being a pantser. You're not going into it with an outline, but he actually has like a particular way that he goes about it. So there are people who are like true pantsers, where they literally just write completely off the cuff, just completely whatever is out of their head, and they just go straight through to the end. The bright side to this is that it's literally just fed off of your creativity, so you can literally go anywhere, do anything, and some people really thrive with that kind of openness. However, it is statistically unlikely for someone who goes true pantser to actually finish their novel, because if you're just relying on your creativity, the chances are you're either going to reach a writer's block moment where you just burn out because you're like, I got nothing left, or your wonderful creativity is going to trail you off to another project and you're not going to finish the one that you are currently working on. So it's not a recommended method by most writers, including me, and I will get to what methods I really use at a later point in the video. But going straight pantser, you can give it a shot. I mean, there's no reason why you can't be part of the statistics that does finish. So go ahead and give it a try. The writing into the dark method, I'm going to just kind of scoot quickly over top of. Dean Wesley Smith actually has like a whole book out, and he has different talks that he's done. You can even find some of them on YouTube. So I would recommend actually going and checking out his videos or his books in order to really get an in-depth look at this type of method. But essentially, he is taking that writing without an outline, and so that he can use that creativity to keep rolling forward. But then he does actually go back over the work slightly so that he can make sure that he's staying cohesive. Because one of the problems that you can have if you're working completely without an outline is you can end up like rewriting sections of your story more than once because you forgot you already wrote it, or you can end up completely off topic and creating plot holes because of the fact that you don't have those connecting pieces, like keeping things together in your story. So in his method, you are completely using your creativity to spur your forward momentum for the story. You're letting your creativity guide where it goes, and you're letting how each scene develops be what propels you onto the next step. But then you're going back only a certain amount of segment in your work. I can't remember exactly how many words he said to go back. I think it's like 500 words or something like that. Go back that far to reread it, not to edit it, just to reread it to keep yourself on track and then keep pushing forward. It's not about editing, and that's one of the hard parts if you ever go to like reread your work while you're writing, which you kind of need to do. It's not for the purpose of editing. It's for the purpose of keeping yourself on track. So definitely, if you're interested in finding out more about writing into the dark, check out Dean Wesley Smith on YouTube or through his books. Both are really good options. And I would definitely lean more towards recommending you trying his writing into the dark method versus just being a straight pantser. The next method that we are going to talk is using one of my favorite inventions to exist, the sticky note. Now, if you've been on my channel for a while, you will know that I'm also a teacher. It just comes up every now and then because teaching is a vocation. It's part of your life, just like writing. So I actually do a lot of my lesson planning using sticky notes, and I do actually use this as part of my method for plotting out my novels, which I will once again get to later. The reason why I'm saving what I do until later is because I kind of do a little bit of a combo, and combos are okay. So for sticky notes, you can actually use it from the very beginning. You can use it for brainstorming and figuring out what you're even going to write to begin with. And then you can also use it to plan out the different steps of your novel. I actually first got introduced to using this method of planning for a novel, not because I do it for teaching. Interestingly enough, you think that I would make the connection on my own, but oh well. I actually was able to take a class from a wonderful author, Kasim Karsa. He actually has this class on Skillshare if you have an account there. And he also has other platforms and other ways that you can get to this information through him. I highly recommend you check him out. But he had this whole class on Skillshare about using sticky notes to help plot out a novel. So let's talk about using it to brainstorm first, and then we'll talk about using it to actually plot out your novel. When you're brainstorming with sticky notes, you are literally just doing part of the brainstorm process. You're going to start with one idea, put it on one sticky note, stick it up on a wall, stick it up on any flat space that you happen to have that's available where no one's going to be messing with the sticky notes. Then you are going to branch out from there. So you're essentially creating like a web concept map design, if you're familiar with those, where like you have like a circle in the middle and then like these branching lines going off to other circles that like have different points in them that all relate. So you're doing that, but with sticky notes. So you're going to have one central thing that you start off with, and then you're going to branch out to other areas with more sticky notes, and you are going to be taking those sticky notes and moving them depending on where they end up fitting better or what ideas you find more interesting, and that is going to help you to narrow down your plot idea. Once again, I recommend checking out Kasim Karsa's class on it so that you can get a lot more of an in-depth look into particular that part of using the sticky note process. You can also use it to plot out your novel by doing it for a scene by scene basis. So once you have your novel idea, you have your characters, you kind of have an idea of where you're starting, you can break it up into different scenes and different chapters in order to come up with your plans for each. You will then use your sticky notes. So you'll have an area that you have separated off, and every sticky note inside that section is going to be for scene one. You can have a sticky note that represents each character in that scene. You can have a different sticky note for each action that needs to take place, each location. If you want to use symbolism and it's going to be something that you're carrying through as a type of theme in your novel, that would be a great thing to put on a sticky note and put in that areas as well. So basically, you're going to be taking the elements that are necessary to create a scene, and you are going to be giving them each their own little highlight through a sticky note. Then, once you have those basic pieces of information, you are going to figure out how they are going to flow together. Which points need to go where? When does each character show up in the scene? And you are going to rearrange your sticky notes based off of those connections. If you need to, you can go full like FBI plot board and put string between things if you need to, or you can rewrite sticky notes, or something that I really like to do, I color code like crazy for everything. I find it helps keep organized. And so you can use like different color coded markers on your sticky notes to help further organize them, because obviously you're not going to want to like remake a sticky note for each time in a scene a character shows up. So you could have point one be one color, point two be another color, and then you can just put those dots on those sticky notes. Once you have your first scene worked out, you're going to just repeat that process for each of the following scenes. And you are going to be doing that over the course of your novel. Obviously, if you do your whole novel at once, you're going to run out of room pretty quickly. So I would recommend doing the whole scene with those sticky notes. If you have the space, do the whole chapter. Once you have it all completed, take a picture of it and then write it. As you're writing it, you can make changes based off of what comes up throughout your writing process, because you still have that room for creativity even while using a plotting method. So you're going to have that picture of the original, but as you're going to change the sticky notes based off of the changes that end up coming up as you're moving through the actual writing. Once you get through that scene and you have all those changes set, you're going to take another picture. That way you have kind of a reference point for how things change, and you can actually use that kind of like a data point, so that when you go to plan out the next scene, you can see the types of changes that happened, and maybe you had like a few extra things that you didn't really need or were a distraction to you, and then you don't put them in the next time because you notice that change. And then you keep that picture of the final choice that you made so that you can go back and reference it at a later point. Or one of the suggestions that Cassine Carsa had in his class was to have something that you can roll up, like a sheet of parchment paper that you put the sticky notes on. He recommended it because, like, if you're living in an apartment or a shared space where you like will have someone else who can probably mess with it or will need that space at some point, you put it on like a long thing of butcher paper or something, and then when you're done with it, you can roll it up and save it for later. So if you want to make sure that you can keep manipulating those sticky notes even after you've written the scene, that might be a really great option for you as well. The third method we're going to talk about, you probably think should be the first method that we talked about because it's the most traditional form of plotting for a novel. It is the outline. Now, an outline is exactly how it sounds. It's literally an outline of your story. It's just like if you were creating an essay for school. Each chapter is going to be a heading on the outline, and then inside of each chapter, you're going to have different bullet points for different scenes, and underneath each scene, you're going to have the elements that are happening in that scene that are important and relevant for you to be able to track how things are going through the story. So that one's pretty straightforward. It's definitely worked really well for a lot of people, so I would recommend giving it a try. Personally, I don't like that method so much just because I have a tendency to latch on a little too tightly to it, and then I don't give myself the liberty to break away from it. So that's just a me issue. I'm pretty sure not many people have that issue, but for me, if I put it in that kind of format, it just kind of like locks me into that space, and then I'm constantly going back to look at the outline in the worst way, and I'm not really letting myself develop outside of that. And in my opinion, it's kind of important to have both that balance of structure and that balance of creativity to let things go where they will go, because sometimes you have an idea in the middle of your novel that you didn't have at the beginning of your novel that will really help to make it a better book in one way or another. So that's why I believe that you need to have balance. So if you're someone who doesn't feel like they're being imprisoned in their outline like I tend to feel, then absolutely go for it. There's nothing wrong with doing it. Just because it doesn't work for me doesn't mean that it's not a good method. Absolutely, 100%, give it a try, see if it works for you, because it is a very successful method for a lot of great writers out there. The next method we are going to talk about is very similar to the outlining form. It is a graphing form for plot structure, where you're adapting the plot models in order to become a plotting form for you. So by plotting models, what I mean is that there's like a really well-known shape that is associated with plot. It's the models for plot that are usually either called the Aristotelian plot form or the Freytag model. Either way, it's your whole beginning, rising action, climax, resolution, conclusion type deal. So the way that it works when you're using a graphing method to help you plot out your story is that, one, you can literally use that model shape in order to graphically plan out your novel. So you can draw that shape out and then you can just fill in bullet points along that line for what each of your scenes are going to be. There are actually a lot more graphing methods than that, though, and I will be putting up pictures here to show different types of graphs that you can do. So you can do a line type graph where you just have a straight line and you have little boxes of information that shows the scenes that you're going for. You can have literal pictures that you're doing. You can do pretty much regular like graphic organizers. So kind of like how when I was talking about the sticky note method and having like those different diagrams, you can use diagrams in the graphing method in order to plot out your story using these different types of graphs. Sometimes they end up looking like mathematical charts, or like, I don't know if you ever did this in school, but there is actually like a verb ending like graph, like this one looks like a verb ending graph where you're like changing the different tenses of the verb. Anyway, so there are a bunch of different types of graphic oriented models that you could try using. And I would highly recommend it if you're more of a visual person. Like if you know that you're like a visual type learner, a visual type processor, you understand things much better when they come in a picture format. I would highly recommend you giving this form of plotting a try because it will probably work better for you than some of the other forms because of the fact that you're getting this very visual layout for your plot method. So you can either do it very basic where you literally just have those bullet points on the line, or you could have it a lot more graphics oriented, like maybe having a wagon wheel for each scene and then lines in between each wagon wheel in order to show how they connect as the plot moves forward, or putting those wagon wheels like in that Aristotelian platform / Freytag model format. The world is your oyster when it comes to graphic models because literally if you can picture it, you can draw it, then you can make it and it could become the way that you plot. I personally do find this model very handy, especially if I'm working on a more complicated plot structure. The more layers that you have to your plot, the more that I find it personally beneficial to use more of a graphic style model because then it's a lot easier to track all of those different points to me, where with like a general outline you can only do so many subpoints before you can't track so much, or you could have multiple outlines but then you're like comparing how they overlap. I don't know, I just feel like it works better if you're doing a graphing type model when you're plotting something out that is a very complex plot or a lot of subplots to it. But that is going to be something that you're going to have to unfortunately learn for yourself. So just experiment, try it out, see how it goes. Maybe you like the outlining form better, even for like really complex plots. That's perfectly fine. It's an artistic expression. Go for it. The type of method that I use to plot out my novels, as I said earlier, I do mix the different types of forms together. I tend to try to use what I think works best for the particular novel that I'm working on. Like I said, if there's a lot more subplots going on or a very complex plot going on, I will use a different method than one that's much more straightforward. In general, what I tend to lean towards is the Right Into the Dark method, where I really like the creative freedom that I feel like I have when doing that method. The fact that I can just kind of let the story go where it wants to, more or less, and then go back and check it over and make sure that it's all cohesive as I'm going through it. That has worked out pretty well for me. I do also really like the sticky note method, and that's partially because I'm a very tactile learner type person where I like to be able to put my hands on things, and so literally being able to put my hands on the story is useful to me. And then the other form that I really lean towards is the graphic organizer type form, the graphing form. The pictures that I showed you were actually from like different novels that I've been plotting out. And so I like messing with the different types of patterns that I can create in order to create that depth and complexity. The more complex the type of plot I'm working on, the more that I lean towards that graphing side, just because there's too many details to just try to keep organized in my head. And there would be way too many dead trees if I use the sticky notes for a more complex form. And so the more subplots that I have worked in, the more twisty and turny the plot is, the more things that I'm trying to hide and then bring up for the reader later, the more likely I am to use a graphing form of some kind so that I can keep all that information organized. So if you're like me, that might work really well for you, either combining these together in some sort of way or having a different form that you use depending on what type of novel or story you're writing at the time. It can be really useful. Or you can even use the different types of forms available to help like unstick you when you get to a stuck point, because we all get to like those writer's blocks moment. No one likes to talk about it. No one likes to experience it, but it happens. And then you can just switch things up a little bit, and sometimes that will get the gears rolling again. So, for instance, the sticky notes that I showed you were because I got to one of those writer block points. I was like, how on earth am I going to do this scene? And so, even though I had done a graphing style method in order to map out the plot for that story, I broke off for a minute and I did the sticky note method in order to work out that individual scene so that I could keep going. After discussing all of these different methodologies, I hope that you found one that is going to be pretty useful for you. If you haven't heard of one of these before and you're pretty sold on a method that you're using currently, go ahead and give it a try anyway. You might find out that you like it. And once again, if you get to one of those sticking writer's block moments, maybe that's going to be what helps unstick you. If you are still trying to nail down what's going to work for you, go ahead and try as many of these as you can until you find something that really sings for you. Because as I said at the beginning of the video, what is the best way to plot your novel is the one that's going to get it done. It doesn't matter what I think is best for me. It doesn't matter what is best for a best-selling author that's out there that you love. What matters is what's going to help you to get your novel actually finished. That is the goal. That is the key. So just keep trying them until you find something that works. And if you don't find one that works, mesh them all together until you find something that works. If you need support, we're a wonderful community out here ready to help you. Don't be afraid to ask for help. That's what we're here for. If you like the video, go ahead and like it. If you are new, please heavily consider subscribing. If you haven't yet clicked on that bell, go ahead and do that too, because I post videos every Tuesday and Thursday on one of these different topics, which I do believe that you will enjoy. If you have a hankering for extra content when I don't have a video out, you can also go over to my Facebook page, because I have posts that go out on the days that I don't have videos going out. It's pretty nifty. Until the next one, have a good one.